Dustin Poirier has been one of the UFC's most exciting, resilient, and dangerous fighters. Nicknamed the Diamond not just for his Louisiana roots, but for how pressure forged him into something unbreakable. Poirier represents more than just another lightweight contender. He represents grit, growth, and grit again. From wild brawls in the featherweight division to methodical technical wars at lightweight, Reefer has always been in the trenches. His wars with Justin Gaethje, Conor McGregor, Dan Hooker, and Max Holloway are instant classics. His finishes are violent, but his post-fight interviews are thoughtful, often emotional. But for all his wars, all his victories, and all his highlight reel moments, there is one thing that has eluded him: the undisputed UFC title. Yes, he held the interim belt in 2019 after beating Max Holloway, but interim gold is like a promise ring, symbolic, hopeful, but not quite the real thing. The battle for undisputed gold just got more intense, and when it came to the actual title fights, something always went wrong. 3 times he stood at the gates of UFC mortality. 3 times he was stopped: Khabib Nurmagomedov, Charles Oliveira, Islam Makhachev, 3 of the most dominant names in modern MMA. Each time Poirier believed it was finally his time. Each time it wasn't. Was it bad luck? Was it strategy? Was it mental? Or was it just the level of competition? That is the central question this episode will explore. Because to understand Dustin Poirier's legacy, you can't just look at the wins. You have to examine the losses. Not the early ones in his career. Not the learning experiences. The ones that really mattered. The ones that broke his heart and maybe, just maybe, revealed more about him than any victory ever could. In this 5-part breakdown, we'll revisit each of those crushing defeats, not just to analyze how they happened, but to explore the deeper story beneath each one, the mental preparation, the hype, the mistakes, the moments that turned the tide, and the aftermath. After years of wars inside the octagon, Dustin Poirier, it finally stood on the brink of greatness. In 2019, he was no longer just a fan favorite. He was a real contender. The UFC's lightweight division was a battlefield of killers. And among the chaos, a golden opportunity emerged: the interim title fight against Max Holloway. But why Holloway? Why not Khabib? The reigning and undefeated champion at the time, Khabib Nurmagomedov, was serving a suspension following the infamous post-fight brawl at UFC 229. With the lightweight division on hold, Dana White didn't want the title picture to freeze, so the UFC booked Poirier versus Holloway for the interim belt. A clash of 2 warriors who had paid their dues. Holloway, the reigning featherweight champion, was moving up in weight. Dustin, already battle-hardened at 155, knew this was his moment. The 30th of April 2019, UFC 236. It wasn't just a fight, it was a war. 5 rounds of high-volume violence, grit, and heart. Poirier power told the story early. Holloway poured on the pressure as always, but Dustin dug deep, using calculated counters and crisp boxing to carve out a unanimous decision win. It was a career-defining moment that Diamond was finally wearing UFC gold, even if it was interim. But the celebration was short-lived. Everyone knew what came next. The undisputed King Khabib Nurmagomedov. On paper, it was a classic striker versus grappler showdown. But this wasn't just any grappler. This was Khabib 27-0, suffocating opponents like an avalanche. Still, Poirier believed after years of struggle, after being counted out, after rebuilding himself, fight after fight, he believed he could shock the world. The 7th of September 2019, UFC 242, Abu Dhabi. The lights were bright, the air was thick, and the stakes were higher than ever. In round 3, a moment came that brought every fan to their feet. Poirier locked in a deep guillotine choke. The crowd roared. for a split second. It looked like Khabib would finally tap. It wasn't just a submission attempt. It was hope. Hope that Dustin's journey, all the wars, all the scars might finally pay off. But Khabib didn't tap. Later, Dustin would say, "It seems so close, but so far away. I finish it all the time in the gym, in training, in practice. But like my coach Mike Brown told me, don't jump another guillotine. I mean, we gave up a position in Khabib fight." He stayed calm, popped his head out, reversed position, and minutes later, it was Dustin who tapped, submitted via a rear naked choke. In a matter of seconds, Poirier went from nearly being the undisputed champion to just another name on Khabib's flawless record. After the fight, Dustin placed his gloves on the mat. There was heartbreak in his eyes. "I just thought it was destiny," he whispered. It wasn't just a loss, but shakes the soul. He had come so close within inches of glory and then watched it slip away. After the heartbreaking loss to Khabib, Dustin Poirier didn't fold. He sharpened his tools, doubled down on his grit, and set his eyes back on the throne. And in 2021, he found himself at the center of the MMA world again. Poirier faced Conor McGregor not once but twice in 2021. The first time in January, he shocked the world by knocking Conor out in the second round, a poetic revenge from their 2014 encounter. But he didn't stop there in July when McGregor returned for a highly anticipated trilogy bout after 3 years away from consistent action. Once again proved dominant. Although the fight ended in a doctor stoppage, after Conor suffered a gruesome leg injury, Poirier had already taken over the first round, battering McGregor with ground and pound and heavy shots. 2 wins over one of the sport's most iconic stars reignited Dustin's title hopes. He had earned a title shot against the reigning lightweight king, Charles Oliveira. But this wasn't just any title defense for Oliveira. This was his first defense of the lightweight belt, and he was deep in his prime, riding an incredible 9-fight win streak. Charles had transformed from an inconsistent talent into a relentless, well-rounded finisher. He had submitted Kevin Lee, TKO Michael Chandler, and was evolving into one of the most dangerous champions in the division's history. When Poirier and Oliveira faced off at UFC 269, it was more than just a fight. It was a clash of legacies, a grinder forged in war versus a submission artist reborn from chaos. The first round was classic Poirier sharp boxing, blistering combinations, and relentless forward pressure. He tagged Oliveira multiple times, even dropping him with a left hand that sent the crowd roaring. For a moment, it looked like Poirier was about to complete his redemption arc, but Charles weathered the storm. In round 2, the tide began to shift. Oliveira smothered Dustin in the clinch, landing sharp elbows and knees, gradually draining his energy. Poirier, known for his cardio and durability, looked hesitant, almost cautious, as he tried to avoid the grappling traps Charles had laid. Then came round 3. Just seconds into the round, Oliveira jumped on Poirier's back in a flash, like a predator sensing blood. Within moments, the Brazilian had both hooks in and snaked his arm under the chin. Poirier tried to fight it, tried to peel the hands, but it was too late. The squeeze was tight, calculated, and lethal. Charles Oliveira had submitted Dustin Poirier via a rear naked choke. It was Poirier's second failed attempt at undisputed gold, and though his heart never broke in the cage, his eyes told the story. Another dream slipped through his fingers. After enduring a series of hard lessons against the likes of Khabib, Nurmagomedov, Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier wasn't done, not even close. The diamonds still had shines. And in 2024, when the opportunity came to face Islam Makhachev, he took it with no hesitation. Islam wasn't just the reigning lightweight champion. He was the heir to Khabib's legacy, a calculated, dominant wrestler from Dagestan, with an iron grip on the division. At the time, Islam had defended his title twice and was seen as nearly untouchable. But Dustin didn't flinch. Even at 35 years old, even after wars that had aged him physically and mentally, he walked into the octagon at UFC 302 as the underdog and still believed. And once the cage door closed, Dustin showed why he is never just another opponent. For nearly 5 full rounds, Poirier gave Islam the toughest fight of his career. While many challengers wilted under Islam's pressure, Dustin stood his ground, scrambling out of takedowns, landing sharp counters, and even cutting Oliveira Makhachev badly. The first time the Dagestani phenom had ever been visibly bloodied in the octagon. That scar on Islam's forehead that was Dustin's signature. A crimson reminder that he wasn't going quietly. It wasn't just a veteran surviving, it was a warrior pushing the future of the division to his absolute limit. Islam later admitted it himself. Dustin Poirier and Alexander Volkanovski were the hardest opponents of his life. High praise coming from a man who had dominated nearly everyone else. But in the 5th round, with the fight on the line, Islam found the opening he needed. He snatched Poirier's neck in a Darce choke and squeezed. Poirier tried to fight, tried to survive one more storm, but it was too deep. He tapped the clock, read 2:42 of round 5, and just like that, it was over. But even in defeat, Dustin had won something more, the respect of a new generation. He had turned back time, made the unstoppable look vulnerable, and reminded everyone why he is called the Diamond, not because he always shines, but because he is unbreakable. Dustin Poirier has never been just another name on the UFC roster. He has been a symbol of perseverance, grit, and transformation over the years. He has faced champions, legends, and prodigies, and even when he fell, he never stayed down for long. But every fighter's story must eventually find its final page. After his war with Max Holloway, a fight that showcased his relentless heart and veteran intelligence, Dustin made the emotional decision to walk away from the octagon. No press tours, no big dramatic speech, just a simple, heartfelt goodbye to the sport he loved and bled for. For many fans, the question lingers. Was it bad luck that stopped Dustin from capturing undisputed gold, or were his opponents just that good? When we looked back, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Charles Oliveira, Islam Makhachev, 3 absolute masters of the ground game, 3 different eras, 3 mountains climbed and almost conquered. And yet the only man who made Dagestani juggernaut bleed and attempt to submit Dagestani eagle was Dustin Poirier. It was a reminder that even against a seemingly invincible force, Dustin could create chaos. Now, far from the roars of the arena, Dustin is finally home with his wife Jolie, his lifelong partner, through every win and every heartbreak. And their daughter, Parker, who once watched her father fight for glory, now gets to have him every day without the bruises, without the battle scars. He has found peace in the life he fought to build through his charity work, the Good Fight Foundation. He is giving back in ways that go far beyond knockouts and titles. Because for Dustin, being a champion was never just about a belt. It was about legacy, about impact, about family. So was it bad luck or good opponents? Maybe it doesn't matter, because in the end, the diamond didn't need a crown to shine.
Shine bright like a diamond. Shine bright like a diamond.